Story 1. My former coworkers and I used to hang out for drinks outside a convenience store near a parking lot after every night shift and just talk about our day. There were about 7 of us. It was a theme park type of work atmosphere which attracted a younger crowd. After we finished, some of us would get up to throw our trash away while others would leave it on the ground. One of those who left the trash would say, "Leave it there. That's what the workers are paid for," referring to the cleaners responsible for the area. One of my colleagues from the group that cleaned up after themselves said, "If you really think that, then you're no different than the self-entitled customers we face every day." Since then, the whole group has cleaned up after themselves. So yeah, self-entitlement. Story 2. Do not care about people's feelings. Use them for your convenience and discard them as if they mean nothing. Story 3. Generally, if a person has to learn how to be an adult on their own, they will likely struggle socially as well. Abuse and neglect are detrimental and can significantly hinder a person, especially if they attempt to manage everything independently without appropriate support or therapy. Story 4. Constant complaints about what is going wrong and a lack of appreciation for the help received or what has gone right. Expecting a situation to be resolved by simply throwing money at it. Expecting everyone around them to fix their mistakes. Story 5. Entitlement. I was fortunate to have parents who generally provided me with what I wanted, but they must have done something right because I do not have an entitled mindset. I appreciate anything I am given, no matter how small. Story 6. Not putting your shopping cart back inside or in a cart corral is unacceptable. It is irresponsible to leave it where it can roll away and damage someone else's car. Story 7. Speaking disrespectfully to friends' parents or failing to act respectfully as a guest in other people's homes is inappropriate. Story 8. Never admitting when they have made a mistake. Not even apologizing, just never admitting when they have made an error. Story 9. A 6-year-old girl who lives nearby and plays with my son told me that if he didn't come outside, she would hurt him. When I said, "That's not very nice," she called me a rude name. I let my son play with her, hoping he would have a positive influence on her, but I don't see her having the same effect on him. Story 10. I used to lick the plate after a meal because we were poor when I was a kid. I did it at a friend's house and they were mortified. Story 11. Loud, obnoxious screaming, yelling, fighting, and running around in restaurants, libraries, galleries, and lecture halls, as well as playing music and using devices loudly in quiet spaces that are designated as no-phone zones, are all unacceptable behaviors. Just don't. Story 12. Never learning from mistakes to prevent them from happening again is usually a sign of coddling and spoiling. I observe this frequently. Story 13. Racism is a learned behavior. No child is born with hatred for someone solely because of their skin color. Story 14. Food aggression. It is not simply about asking others not to eat off one's plate. It often manifests as a refusal to share snacks. Some individuals lock their cabinets when they leave the house. If a waiter delivers the wrong food, they react with anger and hostility. This behavior may stem from childhood experiences of starvation, from food being used as a tool for control, or from a genuine belief that all food belongs to them. Story 15. Someone who goes out of their way to bully another person who is just minding their own business, especially after a certain age. Story 16. I would say that my experience in cooking often leads me to believe I am going to create a gourmet meal, but it ultimately resembles a sad sandwich. Story 17. Littering. Where I am from, despite multiple trash cans on busy streets, you can still find cigarette butts, empty cans, and chicken bones on the ground. It seems as if many people in society have not been taught proper habits. Since moving to Japan, I have noticed that public trash cans are rare, yet the amount of litter is minimal. This shows that people in Japan care about living in a beautiful environment. Story 18. Not inquiring about others during a conversation, or worse, asking questions solely to redirect the focus back to oneself. Story 19. Disrespectful behaviors and attitudes are unacceptable. You do not have to like everyone, but it is important to show kindness and respect. Story 20. Inability to find solutions to problems is often observed in individuals raised in upper-class environments who have not had to learn how to address challenges. When faced with an issue, such as a broken oven, they may panic or choose to ignore the problem entirely, despite having access to maintenance contact information readily available. Story 21. Problems with emotional regulation, particularly with anger, frustration, anxiety, and fear, often stem from abusive parents or caregivers who react to any annoyance by shouting or screaming at their children. This behavior can be a trauma response or a learned behavior, and it is often seen as a generational pattern passed down from one's parents. Story 22. To me, disrespecting those in service positions, such as waiters or cleaners, seems poorly raised. Kindness is free. How you treat people who cannot do something for you reflects a great deal about your character. It starts at home with humility and respect. Story 23. Won't take accountability, just disappears instead of communicating, and doesn't like someone saying no to them. Story 24. Being rude to retail and minimum wage workers over minor issues, particularly those beyond a cashier's control, is unacceptable. Story 25. Constant judgment of strangers. Clothing, weight, grooming, and idle behavior are all completely harmless traits, unlike dangerously poor hygiene or bothering others. Just a person existing. Things I would never notice or even consider judging someone for. And these individuals think it's acceptable to speak negatively about others, practically in their presence. It's incredibly frustrating. Story 26. Whenever I see a family at a restaurant and every person at the table is on their phone instead of being present, it makes me think they have become accustomed to that type of neglect. As a result, they pass it on to their children, who do not know any better and follow the same pattern. Story 27. I believe there is a long list of things people might say scream poor upbringing, but I like to think most of us are just doing our best with the tools we have. If I had to pick something, I would say, treating people like they are beneath you is not poor upbringing. It is just forgetting that we are all human beings in the same situation. Perhaps someone was not taught kindness, or maybe life just knocked the kindness out of them for a while, but I believe it can always be learned, no matter how late the lesson. Instead of judging the upbringing, maybe we can offer them a better way. Story 28. In public transit or in any public places, people often put their feet up on chairs, play loud music or scroll through TikTok on speaker, and leave trash behind. This behavior is generally inconsiderate and disrespectful. Story 29. Lack of manners. It doesn't matter if you grew up rich or poor. If you have no manners, you were raised by unkind individuals. Story 31. Anytime a person throws litter or does not dispose of their garbage properly at a table, leaving hair and saliva around the sink, walls, and vanity in the bathroom is unacceptable. Please clean up after yourself. Shaking but not using toilet paper properly is inappropriate. I can smell your odor before I see you. Having multiple neighbors inform a person that their loud late-night activities are not private but doing nothing to reduce the noise is inconsiderate. Telling employees about extravagant vacations and deciding where a family member goes for long-term care when the employees under them cannot afford to save enough for rent deposits or healthcare is thoughtless. Not considering how inconsiderate it is to play audio from your phone in a public place is frustrating. I enjoy podcasts and audiobooks, but please use earbuds. They are available at low prices. Sneezing or coughing without covering your mouth with your sleeve or elbow is unacceptable. It is 2025, and just because monitoring for communicable diseases in America has been underfunded does not mean that illness does not spread in the same way. Story 31. Lack of consideration for others. Being loud in public. Self-centeredness. Inability to be independent and accomplish tasks. Blaming others. Story 32. My son's live-in girlfriend belches loudly and laughs about it in front of everyone. So gross. Story 33. Awful social skills are characterized by raging, defensiveness, denial, lying, crying, and disappearing. Anything to avoid saying sorry. Story 34. People who lack self-awareness in public spaces can be quite inconvenient. This includes individuals who play music loudly on their phones or through speakers, those who talk on speakerphone, and people who block grocery store aisles while texting. Story 35. Standing in the middle of the street to block cars and only moving when drivers get out to chase them is absolute ignorance. Story 36. To be honest, most comments reflect Trump's behavior, which serves as a public example of someone poorly raised. 30 million people voted for him, so I guess that's where we are. I apologize for not proofreading my comment. Story 37. Just say they do not want to talk about it more during the argument, so you seem like the one who is overreacting, even though you have some valid points. It is obvious the reason they do not want to discuss it further is because they know they are wrong. Story 38. Poor table manners include chewing with their mouths open, slurping, sucking teeth, and not using napkins. It is frustrating to see people lean over their plates with their arms wrapped around them, as if someone is going to try to steal their food. Can be quite animalistic at times. Story 39. Absolutely zero domestic or coping skills. Not only do they lack cooking skills, but they also have a defeatist attitude. Put them in any situation slightly outside their comfort zone, and they struggle significantly. Story 40. While walking through Sacramento, California a few years ago, I saw an older teenager urinating on a mailbox. I said, "Come on, man." And he replied, "Who are you to tell me what to do? I'm grown." It is unacceptable to urinate on the side of a mailbox. Story 41. I'll be bold here. There are two fish and chip restaurants I can reasonably choose from, both part of the same chain. One is located in the newest upscale neighborhood in town, populated by professionals. The other is in the oldest public housing estate. The area outside the restaurant in the affluent neighborhood is immaculate. In contrast, the area outside the other restaurant is cluttered with discarded chewing gum and litter. Both establishments have litter bins just 10 feet away. At some point, it becomes an attitude problem. Story 42. I am in the South, so I realize this isn't true everywhere. However, for me, the lack of a ma'am or sir, especially when speaking to someone older or in authority, resonates deeply. Additionally, saying thank you is important. I believe that if someone does something for you, you should express your gratitude. Story 43. Never take responsibility for anything, quickly engages in circular arguments, resorts to name-calling, shows no respect for anyone, lacks sympathy, is self-absorbed, is two-faced, and creates double standards. Story 44. Blocking the footpath because dropping off their child at their private school is far more important than anyone wanting to walk their children to the state school further up the road without having to take them onto the road during rush hour traffic. Oh, sorry, you mean the children? Story 45. When they believe that spanking or hitting a child is the best or most effective way to discipline them. Story 46. Always playing the victim and never taking accountability. The inability to apologize without it sounding backhanded. Story 47. Plays videos and has conversations on the speaker at full volume, regardless of location, such as a waiting room or a grocery store line. Story 48. Heavy entitlement describes a person who expects others to do things for them. When things don't go their way, they complain and blame everyone else, showing no accountability whatsoever. Story 49. Not returning shopping carts to the cart caddy and leaving them to roll and hit cars in the parking lot. Story 50. They are obsessed with earning and maintaining social capital and hierarchical superiority. I know that is true for the majority of people, but few seem to realize that this obsession is rooted in inadequate upbringing. Individuals whose emotional and psychological needs were met in healthy ways during childhood do not spend their entire lives obsessing over accessing and hoarding social capital to dominate others. Story 51. Talking loudly in public enclosed spaces shows a lack of respect for others. This behavior usually results from inadequate discipline by parents. Story 52. Playing your videos loudly in a public place is weird and specific. Please turn your phone down or something. Story 53. Being a bad neighbor includes playing loud bass when sharing a wall and banging hotel doors. Poor behavior on public transport includes music on speakers, feet on seats, and placing bags on seats. Story 54. Expecting more from others than they are prepared or willing to offer in return. Most main character energy comes from adults who took their laundry home for their mothers until their mid-20s. Story 55. Bad table manners include chewing with an open mouth, speaking with a full mouth, blowing noses, burping, and passing gas. Story 56. A home can be messy or dirty. There is a clear distinction between the two. If you do not understand this difference, it suggests that you may not have been taught it. Story 57. Not knowing how to dress properly in public can be challenging. You don't have to wear a three-piece suit everywhere you go, but avoid wearing pajama pants or ripped, dirty jeans in public settings. Story 58. Not having manners, being unkind to customer service representatives, littering, and not picking up after yourself. Story 59. People who act entitled to emotional support in restaurants and businesses simply because they are paying for a service. Story 60. Bragging around others who are less fortunate is one of the most obvious signs that the person never received affection as a child. Story 61. Table manners and general manners, such as screaming in public and making no attempt to pay, can be quite off-putting. While I don't mind covering the bill, not even offering to contribute reflects a lack of basic decency that may stem from poor upbringing. Additionally, being rude to service workers conveys a sense of entitlement that is equally unacceptable. Story 62. People who treat servers and service workers poorly are unacceptable, regardless of their wealth. Treating service workers in such a manner is deplorable. Story 63. Using weaponized incompetence at work makes it harder for everyone who has to deal with the mess you've created. Story 64. Kids run through a store, and when they bump into someone, they don't say sorry or anything. They just act like you got in their way and keep going. Story 65. Never let someone with whom you are conversing finish a sentence or interrupt someone else's conversation without a valid reason. Story 66. Not giving up your seat to someone who is pregnant, elderly, or clearly in need on public transportation. Story 67. Abandoning a shopping cart instead of returning it to its place is a true test of character. Story 68. Some of these videos from America circulating on social media show children vandalizing stores, adults damaging shops and restaurants, and people dressed inappropriately dancing in the middle of restaurants. It's also disappointing. It seems people cannot be trusted to behave in public. Story 69. Reflecting nostalgically on how your grandmother disciplined you when you misbehaved is a reminder of the importance of healthy boundaries in childhood. It's crucial to understand that any form of abuse is not acceptable. Story 70. Very often, we have customers who come in to shop while unwell, or their children are sick. Food is essential, so they have to shop to eat. However, the number of people who come unprepared or lack the manners to clean up their own vomit, or at the very least offer to help, is concerning. At least once a week, we experience someone vomiting on the floor and leaving it for us to clean. When did this become normal? I would never expect someone else to clean up my waste or my child's vomit. What is going on with this? Story 71. Putting your bag on the seat beside you on the bus or train and not moving it when you see that the seats around you are filling up is inconsiderate. If the bus is half empty, it may not matter if one more seat is taken, but it is selfish to prioritize your bag over a person needing a seat. Story 72. A member of our friend group passed away, and my husband and I offered to host the wake. We had a clean house, a catered meal, an open bar, and everything else needed. One of the first people to arrive, not a friend but an acquaintance, walked in, passed the loaded table and bar, and went straight to the kitchen. He opened the fridge and saw a container of strawberries. He said, "Ah, you're keeping the good stuff for yourselves." Story 73. At a cafe, a man snapped his fingers at the barista to hurry up. He didn't say please, he just barked orders. My friend muttered, "Who raised you to treat people like that?" Felt like total entitlement. Story 74. If someone never says a simple please or thank you, how hard is it to express gratitude? Story 75. Honestly, I find this question objectionable. The phrase poorly raised conveys an air of superiority and condescension. Certain overarching values never go out of style. Kindness, respect, responsibility, diligence, and perseverance. However, attitudes and behaviors that may be offensive to some are completely acceptable to others. Values vary according to region, religion, and cultural tradition. Furthermore, things change with the times. Who are we to say that someone else has been poorly raised? This attitude does nothing to improve our society. Instead, let us model and teach compassion, kindness, service to others, and respect. Story 76. There is the shopping cart situation. Do people put their shopping carts back at the grocery store? I think of it as a social contract. We all have to agree to do the right thing, even if it is inconvenient. Story 77. The inability to manage emotions such as jealousy can lead to violent, malicious, and aggressive behavior. Story 78. Throwing trash on the ground is unacceptable. My 5-year-old knows better than to litter. Surely a grown adult can make it to a trash can. People who do not tip for service or are rude to service workers simply because they can are disappointing. Story 79. Americans living abroad. I used to work as a customer assistance supervisor in a town in Mexico that is highly populated by retired Americans who cannot afford their lifestyles in the United States. That does not prevent them from feeling superior. I was the only employee who spoke English at that time. I was once scolded by an angry woman complaining about employees not speaking English. I told her that in Mexico, the official language is Spanish, so she should learn Spanish instead of demanding people to speak English when they are not required to. There are also several videos on social media of Americans complaining about musicians playing regional music and prohibiting locals from visiting beaches in front of their houses. Even though they do not usually own the properties, and beaches are protected as public spaces under federal law. Not even hotels own the beaches in front of their properties. Story 80. People who pretend they do not have money rely on others to pay their bills. Yet they go on holiday a few weeks later or purchase an expensive house. Story 81. Being a picky eater, I work at a prestigious law firm. Sometimes we assistants and paralegals are allowed to join the catered lunches and trips that are clearly part of an income tier where starting salaries are 3 times what we can expect to earn, even if we take on multiple project management roles. The food served is neither bad nor of poor quality. Realistically, it's completely out of our league. I have one colleague who is just a secretary, but she rolls her eyes at everything. She doesn't cook meat at home because she finds it disgusting to touch. Sure enough, she treats herself to a steak or some other expensive cut, costing between 50 and 100 euros per portion, and then won't eat it because something is off. Too rare, too chewy, or weird herbs that she doesn't like. If the potatoes taste of vinegar, she refuses to eat the rest as well. It's quite a show every time she feels the need to demonstrate how refined her palate is, when in reality, all it shows me is that she lives on yogurt and chicken nuggets. Story 82. Littering. Eating with an open mouth. Being loud in public or shared spaces, such as individuals who listen to music without headphones or make phone calls using loudspeakers. Lack of politeness and manners, including those who do not say hello, please, thank you, or sorry. Story 83. Not saying thank you when someone holds the door for you and not allowing people to exit an elevator before attempting to enter are both examples of poor etiquette. Story 84. Driving around with something inappropriate written on your vehicle or on a t-shirt in public, such as, I eat inappropriate things, or I engage in intimacy on the first date. Story 85. I was once in school and we had a new kid. I could tell he was trying too hard to fit in, and I didn't want to associate with him. He started acting out and engaging in illegal activities like driving underage to impress the girls. One night, he lost control and began harassing and abusing girls. He is currently not favored by the class, and his actions are questionable. Message me to learn more. Story 86. No consideration for how their actions can impact others. I grew up being taught that everything I do will have an impact on others, especially those around me. I have noticed that people who do not share this value often also lack responsibility for their actions. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.